This is for not giving me a raise in my last evaluation.
And here we are with yet another zombie movie. What is this, like the third one in the 10 movies we've seen? And coming out of Alien Abduction, the worst Asylum movie I've seen so far, we get something very similar to Alien Abduction. Except a lot dumber. But hey, a dumb movie isn't a bad thing. If it knows how much stupidity it's resonating, which Alien Abduction was oblivious to, and it can still be a fun watch. And ho 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 boy! Does this movie excrete stupidity from every single pore. Like Death Valley before it, this movie pulls no punches in how over-the-top and hilariously idiotic it can be. Except, believe it or not, this movie has an even dumber plot than that movie. Heck, it might have the dumbest plot we've seen so far! Vampires vs. Zombies wishes it could be as inane as what we have today. I could just keep making comparisons to other movies we've already gone over, but instead, let's shuffle over to the synopsis and begin this dead-on-arrival movie. Travis is blowing apart zombies in his home with a shotgun when some of their blood gets in his mouth, slowly infecting him. To make things worse, the police show up, and they obviously don't buy that the people he killed were the living dead. He's taken to a maximum security prison where he just gets worse and worse, spraying blood on the prison doctor and a couple inmates before he's thrown into solitary where he fully becomes a zombie. From there, the infection spreads, mutating everyone who ingested his blood into zombies, who then descend on the guards and other inmates, growing their numbers and infecting the entire penitentiary. With only a few survivors remaining, can they survive the zombie horde and escape the prison? Could all of this have been prevented if one person had a single brain cell in their heads? I'm kind of in love with how awful this movie is. I mean, this is just wow. Most movies so far have had to constantly lower my expectations to find anything of value, and this movie is no exception. It's ironic that Alien Abduction was the last movie I featured because this flick has a lot of the same qualities as that one. The camera, the acting, the editing, the sound balance, it legitimately feels like the exact same crew finished Alien Abduction, then went straight to Dead Men Walking without checking how their previous work turned out. Heck, in some cases, it's actually worse than Alien Abduction. There are places where even less of a crap was given than the previous movie, and it is just fascinating. That's the word for this movie. Fascinating. Fascinatingly awkward, fascinatingly horrible, fascinatingly something that I don't hate as much as I should. It is a fascinating mess. In fact, I feel like we need to get the good points out before I open this particular can of worms, so I'm saving the main course for later. Instead, let's first talk character. It's pointless to go into detail about most of these characters, as everyone's just here for zombie chow. Yeah, spoiler, the movie doesn't have the happiest of endings. But I will say that there's more character to these characters than was warranted. I can tell everyone apart. Everyone has a different role, everyone reacts to the disaster in a different way, there are certain shoes everyone fills for the movie to progress. They're very worn out shoes that barely fit and aren't walked around in much, but they exist. Travis is here to be sick and die, this lady's here to deliver exposition and die, this guy's here to save the lady and die, this guy's here to fight zombies and die, this guy's here to cower with his son and die, and everyone else is here to die. It's a breath of fresh air to have individual characters to root for, and not the cardboard cutout sex and drug happy douchebags of so many other horror movies. And I appreciate the care that the writer gave to them. Not enough to remember their names, but it's nice nonetheless. The acting is pretty bad. But I will give credit that it's the energetic flavor of pretty bad. It's obvious the cast and or director have little to no screen experience, but they are putting effort into their performances I wasn't expecting after the last handful of movies that looked like this. There's legitimate personality to be seen. I like this convict named Johnny and his smarmy attitude that he sees being locked up in a maximum security prison after escaping from 3 other jails as a challenge. So even when he's being beaten up or running from hordes of the dead, he still has this determined look on his face, often accompanied by this sly smile that says things are still going his way, even when they obviously aren't. I like Warden Mahler and how he has to act tough around the guards and prisoners, but still cares about his family, especially his son, who he tries to clear his schedule for to spend time with. He's not a sadist like other movie wardens are presented as. He's just doing his job of making hard decisions and trying to keep as many people as possible alive in this state of madness, which makes him the only character I feel sorry for when he dies. But my favorite character is the main prison officer, Sweeney. He comes in at the start and I'm going, oh great, here's the party pooper, the guy who gets in the way, refuses to believe in the situation, and ends up doing more damage than the zombies. But that's not the case. Instead, he becomes the most take charge of the situation, leading his group of prison guards against the zombie infestation, clearing the way for any survivors, and all around kicking ass and taking names. It's made even better with how seriously this actor is taking his performance.
You are here because you cannot function in normal society. You are here so you will no longer do harm to others. The outside world has sent you to hell. Guess what? That was my playground.
Even when he's dying, that just makes him angrier. Oh, I look forward to seeing this guy pop up in future Asylum flicks. And then there's this prison gang leader who I don't want to run into. I have a good idea of what he's in for. But the best acting in the movie has to be from the undead hordes. Seriously, the people playing these creatures are having the time of their life. These are some of the most energized zombies I've seen since I last played Left 4 Dead. They're running around, screaming, twitching, reaching out and biting at everything they can. I could watch these things all day. It's like if Nicolas Cage's expressions and Reb Brown's screams had a kid who was then infected by the 28 days later rage zombies. And then there's this guy. Now this guy knew what to do with his 2 seconds of fame. No major guest stars of note, but we do have a lot of returning faces, particularly from the previous Alien Abduction movie. Griff First is back as Johnny, who, despite having main character status here, still barely has more screen time than he did as Todd. Bobby James, who played the good Dr. Booker, is Warden Mahler, which, what do you know, this guy actually can act. We even get Charles Schneider, who played the mad scientist, as this guy called the Reverend. And this is sadly the only performance I could say was better in that movie than this one. A few actors you may even recognize from previous Asylum movies we've looked at. Oh hi, Scott Carson, aka Sheriff Larry from Scarecrow Slayer, aka Coach Avery from Revenge of Bloody Bill, aka a few other roles from Asylum movies we haven't seen yet. And among the newcomers, we have Brandon Stacy as Travis, who Trekkies may recognize as Sergeant and Spock from a few fan series, James Ferris as Jenkins, who we'll see again in a few other Asylum movies, and Chris Anglin as Sweeney, who really likes being John F. Kennedy. We even get an appearance from the film's director, Pete Mervis, as one of the arresting officers, and Leigh Scott, who wrote and directed The Beast of Bray Road and served as this movie's line producer, is a slacker prison guard. One that doesn't last long after the zombie outbreak. Yeah, take that, Mr. Scott. That'll teach you forgiving us. Actually, I haven't seen a terrible movie from him yet. I'll keep this scene on hand, though, just in case. Speaking of ties to other movies, we get possibly the first attempt at an Asylum shared universe, and far from the last attempt. Which, yeah, if you're gonna reuse the same actors for a dozen movies, might as well connect them somehow. One of the prison guards is named Jenkins, a name you may recognize as shared by the main character from The Beast of Bray Road. And yes, he straight up admits they're brothers.
Chicago, huh?
Yeah,
I have a brother in Chicago.
really.
Chicago, yeah.
At one point in the movie, we're told how the zombie virus was engineered by the Umbrella Corporation, GeoPharm, Blackthorn Industries, a company that a few characters from other Asylum movies work for. We're never told how Travis is connected to it, or how the virus escaped containment, so maybe one of the other movies can fill in the gaps? Probably not. There's also a reference to this movie in the later produced When a Stranger Calls ripoff, but we'll get to that when we get to that. Alright, so we got enough good traits about this movie out of the way. We understand that the movie's not wholly unsalvageable and there was some level of effort involved somewhere in here. Good, because nothing else in the movie comes even close to competent. Let's burst this sewage line open and let it rain, starting with the plot. I've seen some dumb stories so far during this retrospective, but this is the first one where everything hinges on complete and utter incompetence. It's actually kind of hilarious how nothing makes sense, and you'll excuse me if I suddenly burst out laughing trying to summarize it. Okay, so this guy, Travis, kills these people who have all been infected by a pathological zombie virus and becomes infected in the process. Keep this in mind. Then the police arrive, believe that he's just massacred what I think was his family, and the next time we see him, he's in a maximum security prison. Not days or weeks down the line either. Everything seems to suggest that this all happens on the exact same day. It's ridiculous enough to send somebody straight to a high-security correctional facility right after an event this serious, but it's mentioned that, in between these locations, he was also sent to the county jail. Who I guess we're right in the middle of transferring other prisoners to the prison he eventually arrived at, because he arrives on a bus with a number of other convicts. Again, all on the same day. Ignoring that apparently the murder site, the police station, the county jail, and the lockdown lockup are all on the same street for transportation to be this fast, there are a multitude of steps between arrest and conviction that would take days, weeks, even months to sort through before Travis ended up at the state pen. This isn't the butterfly effect. Somebody doesn't just kill another guy, then arrive at a heavy-duty prison later that night. There are papers to be filled out, records to be updated, motives to be questioned, crime scenes to be investigated, and at the very least, reservations to be made at said facility. And that's not going into lawyers, trials, bail, all the stuff on the accused's side that would also slow the gears or even stop him from going to prison. But no! Apparently this entire process was so speedy that he arrives at the prison same day, still visibly sick, because they didn't even bother with an obligatory medical checkup before placing this guy in a confined space with hundreds of guards and other convicts. And if this doesn't already sound like a series of multi-million-dollar class action lawsuits with how much due process was passed over, everything we see in the movie suggests that the plague turns people into zombies quite quickly. So if Travis is still human by the time he arrives at the prison, it means the entire process occurred before the disease could turn him into the undead. So, just to clarify, he was arrested, taken into police custody, processed, taken down to the county jail, processed again, interrogated, locked up, declared guilty, sentenced, loaded on a bus with other prisoners, taken to the other prison, processed a final time, outfitted, made to stand with the other new arrivals, sent to the doctor, then locked up in solitary, all within a few hours. If even that. Oh my god, the arrest in the room wasn't as speedy as this had to be. This makes the doorstop sentencing and Jeff the Killer sound almost legit compared to the procedural violations they must have made to get from A to B. Oh, but the stupidity doesn't stop there because the prison is full of armed guards. Armed guards that just parade their weapons as they march down the halls right in front of violent criminals. I shouldn't even have to explain that this is not prison procedure and just how stupid this action is. Not just because armed guards with itchy trigger fingers are a hazard to prisoners and overall morale of the prison, but now a convict has the potential to attack a guard and steal his weapon. Yeah, just like that. And of course give every guard a set of keys to every single door in the penitentiary. Even without the zombies, this prison is just a disaster waiting to happen. And when Travis is being led to the doctor's office, which again would have had to happen long before he ever arrived, he vomits blood on several prisoners and the doctor. None of which are put in quarantine, and all are allowed, even forced, to mingle in a crowded cafeteria, even as they visibly get worse and eventually start eating the others. Oh, no, they're still fine. Just toss them a couple aspirin and tell them to sleep it off. It's not like heavily populated prisons have incredibly strict procedures to prevent these things from happening in the first place. If this is how this prison handles a zombie plague, I would love to know what their routine for the coronavirus would be. Oh, but the best part? The rotten cherry on top of this garbage sundae? This was all planned in an attempt to contain the outbreak. Yeah, remember that the CDC somehow knew that Travis had something to do with the virus, so they sent an agent to investigate, only to arrive after he had already been carted off. So, the CDC, somehow receiving the news before Travis was processed, had Travis relocated to the prison for safety. because they reasoned that a crowded maximum security correctional facility was the best place to contain a potentially catastrophic disease. So they transferred Travis to the prison without informing the facility, expecting the prison to know exactly what was going on and prevent the epidemic themselves. And they didn't tell the agent or the prison that she was on her way to investigate this urgent matter, causing her to get held up at every step of her arrival and get there too late to do anything and just in time to witness the zombie apocalypse. Oh, God, I'm dying. Wow. Just wow. This is possibly the most contrived, downright idiotic setup for one of these movies I've seen in my life. That's a lot of words just to say I wanted a zombie outbreak prison movie. Which, don't get me wrong, I'm totally on board with too, but wow, if that wasn't the most convoluted, mind-rotting reasoning to get from point A to point B. Who wrote this movie anyway? Who could even come up with something this insane? Mike what? Well, given that you're listed as an award-winning filmmaker, author, and journalist with decades of experience in those fields, allow me to call you Mr. LaForge so I can have Commander Riker tell you...
You're incapable of that level of incompetence, Mr. LaForge.
Maybe it's a good thing then that the movie's plot dries up around the 40-minute mark and the rest is just mindless zombie shooting and gore. Who would even have the capacity to think after frying their brain trying to comprehend this level of stupidity? This had to be a troll script. Something submitted that the writer thought would be too stupid for any studio to touch, only for the Asylum to say, we don't have a good name to drag through the mud to begin with. Greenlit. Actually, yeah, I think that's it. Mike Watt willingly Andy Kaufman'd his audience, giving us a plot so infuriatingly stupid we're left dumbfounded and angry, only to discover that was the punchline. After all, what do you expect from the writer-director of Demon Divas and the Lanes of Damnation? Yeah, at least I hope that's the case. Oh, but that's not where the confusion ends. The editing and camera work in this movie is amazing. Horrible in nearly every aspect, but amazing to behold. Right from the opening scene, we're suddenly subjected to seizure-inducing cuts and shots of actors, well, having a seizure. For nearly 4 minutes, nothing stays still. The actors, the camera, even the opening credits are all swaying, jittering, jumping, and cutting the scenes from much later in the movie with obnoxious effects layered on top of each shot. And all is set to the movie's hard rock soundtrack that just blares its drums and guitar at the loudest volume possible before compression. It is so confusing and headache-inducing, yet hypnotically metal at the same time. I especially love how the opening trolls its audience. We get about 45 seconds of uninterrupted credits, then the music cuts out and we get a shot of the CDC agent, like the movie's going to start now. Then it suddenly cuts back to the credits and music for another minute. That was genius. Huge props to the editor there. If it was intentional. We get a couple other odd cuts and scene insertions later in the movie as well. Sometimes we'll get a cutaway to something else happening in the prison, then it'll stop halfway through, then suddenly pick up again 15 minutes later. Why? There are a couple scenes like this, where they're just split in half and they only resume after we've forgotten they've happened. Why not just use the complete scenes? You have several of them, just randomly insert them to show how bad things are getting at the prison. Imagine if I tried that editing for this review. That would just be amateur and impossible to follow. Thankfully, the camera starts to calm down after the opening, and we get, I don't want to say professional camera work, as it's still constantly swaying around through much of the movie, but shots that are more easier to focus on at the very least. I get the impression that someone on the camera crew had some idea of what they were doing, and we get a few somewhat impressive shots every now and then, especially this one where it goes in and out of focus depending on which character is talking. I guess on the whole, the camera is just as bad as Alien Abduction, as it's always in motion, and there are some shots that look like somebody's dog grabbed the camera and just shook it all over the place. But it's an action horror movie, not an atmospheric sci-fi thriller like that movie was. I can more easily forgive this flick than that one. But what I can't forgive is just how bad the audio recording is. Once again, we have a movie where they couldn't re-record the actors' dialogue, so the sound clarity is dependent on the size of the room. And since this is actually filmed in a prison, that results in a lot of reverb in every single room.
Somebody get me some water!
What the hell happened?
Kid went crazy.
What kid?
Sick boy here.
Some shots are so echoey, it's practically impossible to make out what anyone is saying. My brain just automatically tunes it out as noise.
You do a cigarette.
Don't smoke.
Yeah, me neither. But it just seems really good right now.
And sometimes it literally is impossible to hear anyone, as the soundtrack and stock sound effects overpower everything the actors are saying.
I'm not gonna die. We're gonna
And yet, despite most of the sound sounding worse than a Dollar Tree earbud microphone, I still can't call it worse than Alien Abduction. That movie was dialogue heavy, and required a stable level to make out what was going on, which it rarely, if ever, provided. Here, we're here to watch zombies get blown up. Who cares what the characters say? Heck, it matters so little that during the action scenes, the characters might as well just be saying this. This is a stupid movie. It's cheap, it's amateur, it's incompetent, it makes no sense, and guy if I don't love it. Who cares if the plot is crap or the editing looks like a cat jumping on a keyboard with Windows Movie Maker open? We're here for zombie brain bursting action and blood and gore splattered all across the room, and that's just what this movie gives us. It's junk food for the brain at its most toxic and mind-rotting, but it's something we need every once in a while. I enjoyed it, and if you're rearing for some zombie violence and you don't care if you can't remember what you just watched, you'll probably enjoy it too. Pop it in, turn off your brain, and have fun. At the very least, any zombie that notices you will just pass on by. And so we've reached the end of another Asylum horror movie. And while the Asylum was, and still is, happy to churn out low-budget horror schlock, something else would happen the same year this was released that would change their business model forever. But we'll have to get to that another day. It turns out that when I started this Asylum retrospective, I overlooked a lot of the studio's history, and the work of the people behind it. So we're gonna do a bit of backtracking and check out the movies that we missed, including the first movie in the Asylum's official catalog. I immediately regret this. Hey there everyone, thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please consider supporting me on Patreon and help me create even more content like this. It's only $1 to get early access to my videos, and only $5 gets you a credit at the end of each of those videos, with higher tiers offering these and even more perks. And as you help me reach certain goals, I have super special content lined up for all of you. Head on over and check out my Patreon today, and I'll see you next time.